In the center of a busy and restless city lived a man named Arman Khan, a man whose name carried both respect and fear wherever it was spoken. People lowered their voices when they talked about him, and many avoided even looking directly at him when he passed by. To outsiders, he was known as a mafia boss, a man who controlled businesses, settled disputes, and made decisions that others never dared to question. But Arman never saw himself as a villain. In his own mind, he believed he was simply a survivor, someone who had climbed out of poverty and built a powerful life with his own strength. He often told himself that everything he did was for security, for respect, and most importantly for his family. Arman had not always lived in luxury. Years ago, he was just a young man struggling to support his sick mother and younger siblings. Life had been cruel to him, forcing him into dangerous work where survival depended on quick thinking and hard choices. Over time, small risks turned into big opportunities, and before he realized it, he was surrounded by money, influence, and people who obeyed his orders without hesitation. Power slowly became a habit, and control became his identity. He learned that fear could open doors faster than kindness, and soon he stopped questioning whether his path was right or wrong. Despite his dangerous reputation, there was one person who saw a different side of him: his wife, Aisha. She met Arman years earlier at a family gathering when his life was not yet fully consumed by crime. Aisha was gentle, educated, and believed strongly in honesty and compassion. She worked as a school teacher and dreamed of a peaceful future filled with laughter, children, and simple happiness. She fell in love with the quiet moments when Arman smiled sincerely, moments when he looked less like a feared man and more like someone longing for normal life. She believed that love could change him, and Arman, for the first time, felt understood. After marriage, Aisha tried her best to build a warm home for him. She decorated their large house not with expensive items but with small personal touches, family photos, handmade decorations, and soft colors that made the place feel alive. She waited for him every night, often staying awake long after midnight just to have dinner together. But as Arman's business grew, he spent less time at home. Meetings, phone calls, and sudden trips became part of his daily routine. Slowly, distance entered their relationship, not through arguments but through silence. Now Aisha was 7 months pregnant, and this should have been the happiest time of their lives. She talked to the baby every morning, imagining a future where Arman would finally slow down and become a caring father. She hoped the child would bring change, believing that responsibility might pull him away from danger. Sometimes she gently asked him to leave his risky world behind. Arman would listen quietly, nodding without giving real answers. Deep inside, he feared that leaving his empire would make him weak, and weakness was something he had trained himself to avoid at all costs. Around this time, another presence entered his life more strongly: Zara. She was everything Aisha was not. Zara was bold, confident, and fascinated by luxury and excitement. She enjoyed late-night parties, expensive gifts, and the thrill of being close to a powerful man. With her, Arman felt free from responsibility. She never asked him to change or questioned his choices. Instead, she admired his authority and encouraged his reckless side. What started as casual meetings slowly turned into emotional attachment, though Arman never admitted it openly, even to himself. One evening, after a long and stressful day, Arman met Zara at a private lounge filled with dim lights and soft music. The atmosphere was relaxed, and for the first time in days, he allowed himself to forget work and family worries. They laughed, shared stories, and drank together while the city outside continued its endless noise. Zara noticed how easily she could influence his mood. She liked testing the limits of her importance in his life. As their conversation became playful, Zara suddenly leaned closer and said with a mischievous smile, "You always say you control everything. Let me see if that's true. Do something crazy for me." Arman raised an eyebrow, amused. "Like what?" "Send your wife some unexpected messages," she said lightly. "Nothing serious, just something confusing. I want to see if she really trusts you." At first, Arman laughed, thinking it was a silly joke. He loved attention and didn't want to appear weak or overly serious. The drinks made his judgment slower, and Zara's teasing pushed him further. He convinced himself it was harmless fun, something that would mean nothing by morning. After all, he believed he could fix any situation whenever he wanted. Control had always been his greatest strength. Without thinking deeply, he picked up his phone. The glowing screen reflected in his eyes as he began typing. Each message felt like part of a joke, words written without emotion or understanding of their weight. He didn't imagine how those sentences might feel to a pregnant woman waiting at home, already sensitive and full of hope. When he pressed send, he smiled casually and placed the phone on the table, completely unaware that those few seconds had started a chain of events he would never be able to stop. For Armin, it was only a moment of entertainment. For Aisha, it would soon become the beginning of heartbreak. That night, the man who believed he controlled everything unknowingly lost control over the most important thing in his life: his family. That evening, Aisha was alone at home, surrounded by a peaceful silence that usually comforted her. The large house felt calm and soft yellow lights filled the living room. She sat on the floor beside a small table covered with tiny baby clothes she had been carefully folding all afternoon. Some were gifts from her parents, while others she had bought herself after spending hours choosing the softest fabrics. Every little shirt and blanket made her smile because they reminded her that soon she would no longer be alone. She often imagined how her child would look, maybe with Armin's serious eyes or her gentle smile. These thoughts gave her happiness even when her husband stayed busy for days. Pregnancy had made her more emotional, but also more hopeful. She believed that once the baby arrived, Armin would spend more time at home. Recently he seemed distant, but she convinced herself it was only work pressure. She trusted him deeply because trust was the foundation of her love. She never checked his phone, never doubted his late nights, and never complained loudly. Instead, she waited patiently, believing that love required understanding. As she placed a tiny pair of socks into a drawer, her phone buzzed on the nearby sofa. Her face immediately brightened. She assumed it was Armin finally messaging her after a long day. With a soft smile, she picked up the phone, expecting something simple like, "I'll be late," or "Take care." But the moment she opened the message, her smile slowly faded. The first text read, "I regret this marriage." For a few seconds, she stared at the screen without breathing. Her mind refused to understand the words. She thought maybe it was a mistake or meant for someone else. Her fingers trembled as she reread it again and again. Before she could react, another message appeared. "I never wanted this child." Her heart began beating loudly in her chest. She instinctively placed her hand over her stomach as if protecting the baby from those cruel words. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she still tried to stay calm. Maybe Armin was angry about something. Maybe someone else had used his phone. She searched for logical explanations because accepting the meaning of the messages felt impossible. Then the third message arrived, "You ruined my freedom." The words felt heavier, sharper. Memories of their happy moments flashed through her mind. Their wedding day, quiet dinners, promises he once made about building a future together. None of it matched what she was reading now. Her breathing became uneven and a deep fear slowly grew inside her. The fourth message hinted at another woman, written casually as if comparing two lives. Aisha felt the ground beneath her emotional world begin to shake. She had always trusted Armin completely, but now doubt entered her heart for the first time. Her hands shook so badly that she almost dropped the phone. Finally, the fifth message appeared, "Don't wait for me anymore." That sentence broke her completely. The room suddenly felt cold and empty. The happiness she had felt only minutes earlier disappeared, replaced by confusion and pain. Tears rolled down her cheeks as questions filled her mind. Was he leaving her? Had she failed as a wife? Did he truly not want their child? She immediately tried calling him. The phone rang once, then stopped. She called again and again, but eventually his phone switched off. Each failed attempt increased her panic. She began sending messages quickly, asking if he was okay, asking what she had done wrong, begging him to explain. But there was no reply. Hours passed slowly. The ticking clock on the wall sounded louder than ever. Aisha walked around the house, unable to sit still. Every corner reminded her of Armin. His jacket on a chair, his favorite cup on the table, photographs of them smiling together. The contrast between those memories and the cruel messages confused her deeply. Her emotions became heavier because pregnancy already made her sensitive. Doctors had advised her to avoid stress, but now her mind refused to calm down. She imagined Armin choosing another life, another woman, leaving her alone with a child he didn't want. The fear of raising a baby without love terrified her more than anything else. She sat on the bed and tried to breathe slowly, telling herself not to cry for the baby's sake. But silence made everything worse. Without answers, her thoughts turned darker. Maybe he was in trouble. Maybe someone forced him to send those messages. The uncertainty hurt more than clear truth. Finally, unable to bear waiting any longer, Aisha made a decision. She needed to see him face to face. Text messages could lie, but eyes could not. She believed that if she talked to him directly, everything would be explained and fixed. Love, she thought, deserved at least one honest conversation. Carefully, she picked up her purse and car keys. Before leaving, she paused for a moment, placing both hands gently on her stomach. "We're going to talk to your father," she whispered softly, trying to sound brave even though fear filled her voice. Outside, the night air was cool and quiet. She walked slowly toward her car, her movements careful because of her pregnancy. As she started the engine, tears blurred her vision again, but determination pushed her forward. She wasn't angry, she was desperate for answers, desperate to save her marriage and protect the future she had dreamed about. At that exact moment, far away in a bright lounge filled with laughter, Armin sat unaware of the emotional storm he had created. He believed everything was under control, never imagining that 5 careless messages were already changing the direction of their lives forever. And as Aisha drove into the dark city streets searching for truth, fate quietly prepared a moment that would turn pain into tragedy. The night felt unusually heavy as Aisha drove slowly through the city streets. Dark clouds covered the sky, and a cold wind moved through the empty roads as if warning her to turn back. Streetlights reflected on the wet asphalt, creating long golden lines that blurred in her tear-filled eyes. She tried to focus on driving carefully, but her thoughts refused to stay quiet. Every message Armin had sent replayed again and again in her mind, each word cutting deeper than before. Inside the car, silence surrounded her except for the soft sound of the engine and her uneven breathing. One hand rested protectively on her stomach while the other held the steering wheel tightly. She kept whispering to herself that everything would be okay once she saw him. Maybe he was angry because of work stress. Maybe someone forced him to send those messages. She created excuses because accepting the truth felt unbearable. Love made her hopeful even when pain suggested otherwise. Rain began to fall lightly, tapping against the windshield like tiny drops of worry. The wipers moved back and forth, but her vision still felt unclear. Her heart felt heavy, and every traffic signal seemed longer than usual. She remembered the early days of her marriage. Simple walks, shared laughter, promises Armin made about protecting her forever. She wondered when things had started changing. Had she ignored signs? Had she trusted too much? Meanwhile, across the city, Armin remained unaware of the emotional chaos unfolding. He sat comfortably in the lounge beside Zara, laughing as music played in the background. The earlier messages meant nothing to him now, they were already forgotten like careless jokes. Zara continued teasing him, enjoying his attention, never realizing how serious the consequences would become. For Armin, the night still felt normal, another escape from responsibility. Back on the road, Aisha's phone suddenly lit up again, placed beside her on the passenger seat. The bright screen caught her attention. For a brief moment, hope filled her chest. Maybe Armin was finally replying, ready to explain everything. She quickly glanced at the notification while slowing the car slightly. The message read, "Tonight was fun. You understand me better than anyone." The words felt like a final blow. They were clearly not meant for her. The meaning was obvious. There was another woman, someone who made him happier, someone who replaced her importance. Her hands began shaking uncontrollably, and tears flooded her eyes so strongly that the road ahead disappeared behind blurred lights. Her breathing became fast and painful. A deep ache spread through her chest as realization slowly replaced denial. The man she trusted completely might truly be living another life. She felt not only betrayed as a wife but also afraid as a mother. How could she raise a child in a broken home? Why had he hidden this from her? Questions rushed through her mind faster than she could handle. At that exact moment, traffic ahead suddenly slowed due to road construction. Red brake lights appeared in front of her like a wall of glowing danger. Distracted by heartbreak and unable to react quickly, Aisha pressed the brakes too late. The tires screamed loudly against the wet road as the car struggled to stop. Everything happened within seconds. A loud crash echoed through the night as her car collided with the vehicle ahead. The impact pushed her forward violently, and the world around her turned into chaos. Glass shattered, metal bent, and the sound of rain mixed with frightened voices from nearby drivers. The airbag deployed, but the shock was too strong. Pain shot through her body as darkness slowly surrounded her vision. Cars stopped along the road. Strangers rushed toward the damaged vehicle, trying to help. Someone called emergency services while another person knocked gently on the window, hoping she would respond. Rain continued falling, washing over the broken scene as flashing lights from passing cars created a blur of red and white around her. Inside the car, Aisha drifted in and out of consciousness. Her thoughts became unclear, but one instinct remained strong. She placed her hand weakly over her stomach, silently praying for her baby's safety. Tears mixed with rainwater as everything slowly faded into silence. At nearly the same time, Armin finally reached for his phone after hours of ignoring it. He noticed dozens of missed calls from Aisha. Confusion crossed his face. She rarely called him repeatedly unless something was wrong. Curious, he opened their chat conversation, and suddenly froze. The 5 cruel messages he had sent earlier stared back at him from the screen. For the first time he read them carefully from her perspective. The realization hit him instantly. What felt like a joke now looked heartless and destructive. His chest tightened as guilt rushed through him. Before he could process his thoughts, another notification appeared, an unknown number calling him. He answered casually, but his expression changed within seconds. "Are you Mr. Armin Khan?" a serious voice asked. "Your wife has been in an accident. She's being taken to the hospital." The world around him seemed to stop. Music, laughter, and conversation inside the lounge faded into meaningless noise. His hands began trembling as fear replaced confidence. Without saying a word to Zara, he rushed outside, his mind filled with panic and regret. For the first time in years, Armin felt completely powerless. The man who controlled businesses, people, and situations now realized he could not control fate. As he drove toward the hospital at dangerous speed, one painful thought repeated in his mind. Those messages, those careless words, might have pushed his pregnant wife onto a road that changed everything forever. And under the cold rain of that tragic night, 2 lives moved toward a moment that would never allow them to return to the past. The hospital corridors smelled of medicine and silence when Armin rushed inside, his heartbeat louder than every sound around him. Bright white lights reflected on the polished floor as nurses and doctors moved quickly from one room to another. For the first time in many years, Armin felt small and helpless. The powerful man who once controlled fear in others now stood shaking, unable to control his own emotions. His hands trembled as he asked the receptionist about his wife, his voice breaking in a way he had never experienced before. A nurse guided him toward the emergency waiting area and told him the doctors were still treating Aisha. Those words felt endless. Every passing minute felt heavier than hours. Armin sat down but could not stay still. He stood up again, walked back and forth, and kept replaying the night in his mind. The messages he had sent returned again and again like painful echoes. What had seemed like a harmless joke now looked cruel and irresponsible. He imagined Aisha reading those words alone at home, confused and heartbroken, and guilt began crushing him from inside. For the first time, Armin truly understood how deeply words could hurt. He had faced guns, threats, and dangerous enemies without fear, but now he realized emotional pain was far more powerful. He remembered Aisha's gentle nature, her patience, and the way she always waited for him without complaint. She had trusted him completely, and he had broken that trust in just a few seconds. Hours later, a doctor finally walked toward him with a serious expression. Armin immediately stood up, searching the doctor's face for hope. The doctor explained that Aisha had survived the accident, but the shock and injuries had caused severe complications. The words that followed felt like the ground disappearing beneath his feet. Their unborn child could not be saved. Armin's mind went silent. He stared at the doctor, unable to speak or even breathe properly. The world around him blurred as reality struck harder than anything he had ever faced. He slowly sat down, his strength leaving him completely. Tears filled his eyes, but for several moments he couldn't cry. The loss felt too large to understand. A future he had barely begun to imagine was suddenly gone forever. Memories flooded his mind, Aisha showing him baby clothes, her shy smile when she talked about becoming parents, her hope that their child would bring peace into his life. He realized he had ignored those moments, thinking there would always be more time. Now that time had disappeared. When he was finally allowed to see her, Aisha lay quietly on the hospital bed, pale and weak. Machines beeped softly beside her, filling the room with a fragile rhythm. Armin stepped closer slowly, afraid even to breathe too loudly. Seeing her like this broke something inside him. The strong woman who once filled their home with warmth now looked fragile and exhausted. After some time, her eyes slowly opened. She looked at him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Armin expected anger or shouting, but instead, he saw deep sadness and disappointment in her eyes. That silent pain hurt him more than any harsh words could have. He tried to apologize immediately, his voice shaking as he explained everything. The joke, the pressure, his foolishness. He admitted his mistake again and again, wishing desperately he could turn back time. Aisha listened quietly. Tears slipped down her face, but she said very little. Her silence showed how deeply she had been hurt. Trust, once broken, does not return easily. She had lost not only her child but also the emotional safety she once felt in her marriage. Even though she survived physically, something inside her had changed forever. In the following days, Armin rarely left the hospital. He sat beside her bed for hours, watching over her, realizing how empty his powerful life felt without genuine love. Phone calls from his business partners went unanswered. For the first time, money and influence seemed meaningless. None of it could bring back the child they lost or erase the pain he had caused. Zara tried contacting him many times, but he ignored every call. The excitement and thrill that once attracted him now felt shallow and selfish. He began to see clearly how his choices, ego, and desire for control had slowly destroyed what truly mattered. Power had given him confidence, but it had also made him careless with emotions. When Aisha was finally discharged, their home felt different. The baby room remained unfinished, filled with silent reminders of dreams that would never come true. Armin struggled to face those memories, knowing he was responsible for the chain of events that led to tragedy. He started making changes in his life, stepping away from many illegal dealings and distancing himself from people who encouraged his reckless behavior. It was not easy, but guilt pushed him toward change. He understood that real strength was not about controlling others but about protecting the people who trusted you. Slowly, he tried rebuilding his relationship with Aisha through patience and honesty. Some days she spoke normally, other days she remained distant. Healing came slowly, like a wound learning to close after deep damage. The story of their tragedy quietly spread among people who knew them, becoming a reminder that actions done without thinking can create lifelong consequences. Armin learned that words sent in seconds can carry weight greater than any weapon. A simple moment of pride and foolish entertainment had cost him the happiness he once took for granted. Late one night, standing alone on the balcony, Armin looked at the silent city below and realized a painful truth. Enemies had never truly defeated him. Instead, his own careless choices had caused the greatest loss of his life. And from that day forward, he carried a lesson written not in power or money, but in regret. Love must be protected with honesty because once broken, even a lifetime may not be enough to repair it.